Okay, this short video lecture is to help prepare you for the first lab module exam, and it will go through the photographs that you have in another file. Okay, what is very, very important about all of these, not only do you need to be able to recognize the photographs and know what the organisms are, but you need to know their classification. And so let's review that real quickly. There are three domains of life, as you can see right here, three domains. There's bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Those are the current classification systems used in science. Um, Please note that the bacteria and the archaea, those two domains, all are made up of what we call prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic means before the nucleus, before there was a true nucleus. And so these have, they do not have a membrane-bound nucleus. Okay, they have what's called a nucleoid. You don't necessarily have to know that for this class, but you might. Actually, you might. Never mind. So we'll go over that in just a minute. But they are prokaryotic cells as opposed to eukaryotic cells, which are in the third domain called eukarya. Okay, in the bacteria domain, there are two groups. They can be divided many, many different ways, but the way we're going to do it is into the cyanobacteria and what are called the bacteria. The cyanobacteria, and you will see photographs coming up of one particular type of these cyanobacteria. This is called Oscillatoria, that's the genus name. They are sometimes called, mistakenly I might add, but they are called blue-green algae. That's another name for it. And the big significance of the cyanobacteria is that these are believed to have multiplied very, very early in the Earth's history in the oceans. And as they did this, they underwent photosynthesis, produced a lot of oxygen, and literally changed the atmospheric content of oxygen, allowing for more complicated organisms to evolve. Bacteria, again, just like the cyanobacteria, there are many of them. The bacteria, there are many, many, many of them. And we're not going to learn too many in lab specifically, but I do want to point out that they are named by their shapes very often. And the three shapes that you will learn about are bacillus. Those are the ones that are what we call rod-shaped, sort of like that. Okay, my drawing isn't very good, but that's bacillus. Another one is coccus. Coccus means sphere-shaped, so the cells are little round balls. And the third major group is spirillum. And although my drawings won't really look like how they are, I'm going to draw them like that. Okay, so those are the three basic shapes, and I have some photomicrographs of those for you to learn. Okay, so that takes care of the bacteria, which is one of the three domains of life. In lab, we are not going to look at the archaea. Okay, we don't have any examples of those. They are very, very similar to these others, the bacteria, but they are a completely different domain. Then we're going to move on to the third domain, which is eukarya. And again, this means that they have a very distinct nucleus with a membrane around it. And these are made up of four different kingdoms: protista, fungi, plants, and animals. On this first lab exam, we are only going to be looking at the protistans. Okay? Another just important point I want to make is that bacteria are very, very tiny. Okay? The eukarya cells, in general, much, much larger. And I'll make some comparisons of that in just a minute. Okay, so the kingdom protista there's been a lot of changes in how the various groups and phylums are named. And so I actually went with an older grouping name. Some of these are still considered the actual phylum name. Some of them have been put into new phylums, and I'm telling you, this stuff changes all the time. Not because the organisms have changed, but because scientists learn a little bit more. They also don't all agree. And so again, what I've done is have used some groupings that are a little bit old school, but that's how I want you to worry about them. Okay, and these 9 phylums or groups are the amoeboids, the ciliates, the euglenoids, dinoflagellates, foraminifera, diatoms, which we will group with the yellow-green algae, brown algae, green algae, and red algae. We have photographs of many of these in for lab for you to learn. We do not have an example of the dinoflagellates, nor do we have an example of red algae for you to identify for lab. Okay, so what's my point? Sometimes on the lab practical, I might ask, what's the domain of this organism? So you need to think, it's going to be either bacteria or eukarya. Those are your only 2 choices. Those are the only 2 domains that I have covered in these lab photographs. Within that, you may have to know the cyanobacteria, and I will also sketch it here real quickly. It generally looks like a long strand, and I'll try to use a picture that's literally blue-green. Cyano means blue-green. And it sort of looks like a stack of coins. Okay, you can use that to help you remember that. Okay, so anyway, I also might ask, what kingdom is it in? Okay, kingdom, generally I don't ask this on the bacteria because it's a little bit overlapping. There actually is not only a domain bacteria, but there's a kingdom bacteria. Okay, and there's a little, different ways of doing that. This is more important, the kingdom Protista. And again, these are the groups or phylum names that you will be looking at. Okay, now let's go ahead and go on to the pictures. Whoops. Okay, here we have the domain bacteria. This right here, as you can guess, that is our cyanobacteria. I thought my writing would look better with this fancy pen, but it's kind of sloppy. Okay, cyanobacteria. You also might see it as oscillatoria, because that's the actual genus name of this particular one. And sometimes it is still called blue-green algae, although it is not a true algae. Okay, then these 3 photographs down below have 3 different shapes of the bacteria. So this one, as you can see, they are rod-shaped. So this is going to be your bacillus. This one right here is going to be your spirillum. And this one right here, little tiny balls, coccus. Okay, we'll move on. Okay, here we're getting into the kingdom Protista. We are now in the domain Eukarya. And those organisms you previously saw, like for example, the coccus, the picture of the coccus, that might be as big, whoops, as this little structure right here. Okay, so there's a huge size difference, I want you to remember, between the prokaryote cells of bacteria and archaea and the eukaryotic cells. Okay, these 3 images here, here, and here are all of the amoeba. And they are in the group of the amoeboids. This is a photograph of a living amoeba. This is a stained slide of an amoeba, secondly here. And then this one right here is a model of an amoeba. and they have these long structures or that are constantly changing that are called their pseudopods or their false feet. That's how they engulf materials to eat or destroy, and that is also how they move. Okay, the second organism that we have right here, these three are also the same organism. Okay, these are called euglenoids. Specifically, this is a euglena. Okay, I'm doing things backwards. The organism is called the amoeba. It is in the group amoeboids. Okay, euglena is in the group euglenoids. Okay, we'll move on. Okay, these three organisms, they're the same thing. They're all called paramecium. And they are in the group ciliates. They are named ciliates because of the little hair-like structures. It's a little bit hard to see, but they are all over the surface of these. This is how they move. On this model, they were lazy. They only put the cilia on one little spot, but really they would surround the entire organism. Okay, we're moving on. So we've done three groups. We're moving on to this right here. These are actually fossils of an organism that is one of the group Foraminifera. And we're not going to worry about the particular name of those. We're just going to call them foraminiferans. Okay? And these I found by a river in central Texas. And those are the fossilized remains of those organisms. These two right here are just a lower and a higher magnification. And these are called diatoms. And the diatoms are within the group of the diatoms or yellow algae. Here we have the last page. This right here is something you see all over the beach all of the time, and sometimes more in the springtime. This is our brown algae that we have here that washes up, and it is called sargassum. And as I mentioned, it is a brown algae. That's the group it goes in. And in this case, it actually is the name of the phylum. The rest of these, and there are three, you have this one, these two are the same. These are in the group green algae. And, you know, there's some big keys here like, that's kind of brown. These are all kind of green. Okay? This one right here is sort of interesting because it is macroscopic, although it's pretty tiny. And I have found these in the Laguna Madre sometimes in the spring and summer. And they have a great name. They are called mermaid's wine cup. Okay. This down here, this is a microscopic view. They're very, very tiny. This is called volvox. And what the name comes from, you sort of see sphere within sphere within sphere. And Volvo, you've probably heard of that car. Volvo means to roll. Okay. So you got all these spheres that can roll around. Okay, this one, or these two, I should say. This one is a photograph of a living one, and this is a stained slide. But these are called spirogyra. Actually, I think that's an I. Oops. Spirogyra. And again, these three are in the group green algae. Now, something that's very important for you to start off with, there are not very many photographs for this exam, but you need to think it all through and get them organized in your head. What I suggest you do is cut them out, label them, and work with them like they're a deck of cards, okay? So that you can automatically separate them and know them well enough not only to know the names of them, but to say, oh, these are bacteria. They go in one stack. Those are the prokaryotic cells, which are in the domain bacteria. Cyanobacteria will go with those. Okay, then you get to the protistans, which, as you know, are all eukarya, and you can stack those up according to the groupings. Okay, shuffle them around and say, okay, I'm going to find all my green algae and put them in a stack, and then make sure that you can name them. And again, the if you just see something like you see a picture like this on the lab practical, and you think, I know what that is. It's a mermaid's wine cup. Well, what if I'm not asking for what's the name of this? What if I'm asking what kingdom is it in? If I ask what kingdom, obviously this one would be kingdom Eukarya. If I ask, oh, listen to me, that's just a lie. If I ask what domain it is in, domain is Eukarya. If I ask what kingdom it's in, it's Protista. If I ask what group it is in, or phylum, it's going to be green algae. And if I ask what is the name of this organism, it's mermaid's wine cup. So make sure that you understand and know the specific name and all of its classification, which groups it goes in. Okay, that takes care of these. We'll, for the next lab practical, we'll be doing fungi and plants. So it's a much bigger group of photographs. So get practicing on these so that when you move on to the next, you have a system in getting those learned.